Welcome to episode 3 of the Into the Indies podcast. Today's guest is the creator of arguably the first indie game I ever played around 20 years ago. He is the director of Senscape, Agustin Cordes. Welcome to the show.
Hi everyone. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm so happy to do an interview. And wow, 20 years ago and your first indie game, that's intimidating, I have to say. But anyway, I'm very, very happy to have a chat here.
Thank you very much again for joining. Yes, 20 years ago, I was in middle school, and I remember playing Scratches for the first time. It was, I think I found it out in a Greek magazine at the time, because it was one of the few games that also had the Greek translation in it. So
yeah, it's actually, it's been exactly. I was checking the date. It was exactly around the time it was released, and back then we were talking to a Greek publisher, Beacon Entertainment, and it was extremely rare to have an indie game published by. It was a fairly major publisher in Greece, and they told us, well, the expectation is maybe 200 copies, no more than that. I don't remember the exact figures, but what I do remember is that we arranged a license per batches of copies, and Beacon was ordering more and more copies because it was selling way more than they expected. At the end of the day, they told me this game sold as many copies as AAA games in Greece. So I know it was popular there.
Especially at the time, you could argue that English was not as popular in Greece. I grew up around that time, 2006, and we were arguably the first generation or second generation at most that we had English at schools, and it was more, okay, English is the language of the future. So you can also imagine that video games were not as popular. They were real pricey at the time, and to have any video game translated in Greek and not being Greek was a delicacy.
Yes, and I remember I was friends with the people who translated the game, Christina Voduri from the site Adventure Greek. It's been a while. It's such a long time, but there was a very popular adventure game site over there. And yes, I remember, the deal was it has to be in Greek, otherwise it won't cause any splash. So I'm delighted about that. And it's one of the reasons why I still, had Asylum translated to Greece, even though it's not as needed as, 20 years ago. But anyway, it's all for the fans.
Yeah. So take us back to that time before Scratches were created, when you started the first ideas of it. Where were you that time?
I was having a regular job doing software for it's not a phone company, but a company that worked with automated responses, IVR machines. Basically, every time you dial to a bank or some, major company, you get an answering machine running you from all this bunch of questions. People hate them. So I'm one of the guys who used to do that. I didn't like it, but it was a job. I was very young. And back then, video games, especially in Argentina, were still kind of like a strange thing, like some sort of dark box. Like, how do you even make a game? How do you get in this industry? What do you have? How do you even get started? So I always wanted to make a game, right? And I informed myself about how to make it. I got in touch with Jonathan Vokes of Darkfall fame. My reasoning was, well, okay, if someone can do this, alone, all by himself in the UK, a pure indie game, surely I can do the same in Argentina. Indies are the same everywhere after all. And yeah, Jonathan provided invaluable information, and I decided to make the jump. I quit my job. Well, actually, no, it's not quite like that. That's not quite the order of operations here, because we made a demo, the first Scratches teaser, which was distributed in online forums, Just Adventure, Game Boomers, Quandary Land was an old one, Mystery Mansion, Adventure Gamers, of course, and the overseas sites, Adventure Greek. I don't remember the full name. Adventure Greek something. Anyway, and the first moment we launched that demo, there is a huge reaction in the forums, and I'm already receiving interviews from Russia to inquiring about the game, and then publishers get in touch. Hey, we want to publish this, and I'm like, whoa, okay, maybe there's something going on here. That's when I decided to quit my job and focus on Scratches. And as they say, the rest is history, but it's been, a long time ago. We had to make our own engine from scratch. The game shifted, the initial style of the game changed as well. People were at first, adverse to that change. From the first teaser to the second teaser that we launched, we went through from the Myst-like format, with, as they used to call it, slideshow mechanics, to panoramic rotation, which in the end proved to be extremely good for the atmosphere of the game. So, it's the part of a very, very long story, but that's how it began, you could say.
A bit of a tease to the future of the discussion, but based on the other projects you've also worked on, they are always adventure games and they're always horror games, or at least some variation of horror. What is your affection towards those genres, horror and adventure specifically?
You could say that I grew up with horror. From at a young age, I began reading a lot. First, it was, choose your own adventure books. And I remember some books such as the Mystery of Chimney Rock, where you have a haunted house. And that always intrigued me. So then I went on reading Lovecraft, which I found fascinating. His descriptions, the atmosphere he was able to convey with mere words, that really was incredible. And of course, the VHS world, which I have all this collection of VHS in my studio here, trying to, recover that aspect of my childhood. I remember going to the VHS store and pick all these movies, look at their covers, and I wanted to watch them all. And I remember renting the house by the cemetery from Lucio Fulci. I may have been, 8 years old. My mother didn't realize what I was renting, and that movie caused a huge impression on me. Huge impression. So I have been watching horror ever since. I enjoy, old-fashioned horror when there was, devote attention to atmosphere, and even if indie filmmakers didn't care about atmosphere at all, the fact that these low budget movies were filmed with crappy cameras and crappy tapes, it makes up for the atmosphere. It's something, the 80s, 70s and 80s horror, you could say, is what has inspired me the most to make these games, along with Lovecraft and many other, horror short tales.
Yeah. And for adventures in particular, why did you choose point-and-click adventures?
Well, it's kind of, a similar story. I used to be, I got acquainted with computers at a very young age as well. My dad was an engineer in Universidad de Buenos Aires here in Argentina, and he used to bring computers at home, or maybe I had to go to university with him because my mother was also had a job, and I remember that basically what I did was sit in front of anything that had a screen, even an oscilloscope. I really, you could say I loved anything with the screen. So I began playing games such as Saxon, Space Invaders, Jumpman, Digger, all the DOS classics, wonderful games, all of them. But by the time I got acquainted with King's Quest, again, when I was, around 7 or 8 years old, it caused a huge impression of me. The ability to explore this virtual world, right, at your leisure and uncover these mysteries and talk to the computer or have a conversation with the computer, look at the flowers and the computer response. That was incredible. So you see the pattern here. At that young age, I got acquainted with adventure games and horror films. So that's basically how I keep marrying these two passions over the years.
Okay. Bringing it back to Scratches a bit before we move on to the other projects. What would you say was your general experience with Scratches, being your first project, your first commercial project as well, being, I would say from your words, an unexpected success even overseas, though I'm not sure how much of a success. You can guide us through that period better. So what is your experience of when you think back to Scratches? What do you think?
Well, it blew my mind. I wasn't expecting any of that. I remember, making some, in retrospective, wise decisions. I was approached by Dreamcatcher at first for a global deal. And, I didn't, it felt to me that we were going to be an afterthought to that publisher because they were too big. So the decision was to go with, smaller publishers per region, such as Beacon in Greece, Rotomedia for the gas territory, they used to call them, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Micro Application in France. I mean, we went with big publishers, really, but it was a more of a regional deal, and it turns out that they did a very good job promoting the game in the respective territories. Even in Italy, which it is unthinkable today to sign a deal for a single country. That is not happening anymore. It's out of the question. It's a past history. So imagine signing a deal with an Italian publisher who distributes the game in magazine stands. That was genius, and that's the other reason why Scratches sold a lot in Italy. That's why after all these years, even though the game is not known at the mainstream level, or it's not popular, in big magazines or in top 100 games list or whatever, but people remember the game because it was everywhere in Europe and in the US, not so much in Latin America. But anyway, I think it was a wonderful experience. It blew my mind, the ability to make the game that I wanted and that it was successful. I say this as humbly as possible. It was not something I was expecting, and I remember receiving emails saying, wow, we are playing your game with our family, and I never had this experience before, sharing a game with my daughter or my son. And, it's quite incredible. So I don't know if that answers the question. It's how I process the answer,
Yeah, for sure. When I was doing a bit of a research to prepare for this interview, I was surprised to find that in between Scratches and the next game we're gonna talk about in a bit, Serena, there is actually an educational game as well in Argentina, Risk Profile. How did this came to be?
Well, after Scratches, there wasn't a well-defined project. So the decision was to take on some gigs, some jobs, and this opportunity arose. And there were basically two candidates in Argentina to do that because no one else was acquainted with adventure games. And we figured, well, it was a long shot for sure. We applied to be, the competitor was huge, like absolutely huge. It was a much bigger company than us, even though we had to associate with another company. So it's two companies who did that game, risk profile, Savarasa and Nucleosis. And we associated with Savarasa. We applied to that leasing, I think it said, because it's a public project funded by the state. It has to go through several steps. So anyway, we applied and we won, which we weren't expecting at all. So it was like, wow, we have to do this now. But the game, it attracted me. It really attracted me, the idea behind the game, and they gave us a lot of freedom to do it. All the jokes, all the the LucasArts feel. It's a shame that it's not in English. At some point recently, we toyed with the idea of doing a fan translation and put it on Steam. I actually got the permission to do it. Anyway, it's in public domain. So I would. Who knows? It was a fun game. Even though it has a lot of Argentinian in-jokes, you could say. I think any fan of adventures could enjoy that game.
What position did you have on that project?
Director and script writer. Yeah.
So how would you compare actually being in the same position in a commercial game, let's say fantasy game, horror game, being fiction, actually that's the word, compared to an educational game where the goal is different?
Well, I mean, we had, for the educational part, we had a lot of support from the company, right, who requested this game, the company from the state, it will be like the IRS from the United States. This was AFIP, which is the taxation office from Argentina. So all the educational aspects that had to be part of this game were contributed and monitored by them. So they had an overview of what they wanted to do. We devised the missions together. It was very organic. It was a good collaboration. So it's different. It's very different than doing something like Scratches, which is basically like a garage thing. We are sitting in your studio, and I remember being basically fixated in front of the computer, programming and writing and testing the game. So it was different because you had to coordinate a team. And I mean, it's a whole different deal. More stressful. It's very different when you have a team of. I mean, it was a small team actually, because we were at most, I think, 10 people in that team. Still a lot more than doing, basically something working solo on Scratches. But it prepared me. It gave me a lot of perspective for future projects that were even more important than that one. All I can say is that it's extremely different. It's like, on one hand, you have to coordinate yourself and you have to be very disciplined to get the game done. And when you're working with a team, it's a whole different challenge. Communications, leadership, motivation, keeping your head straight. It's tough.
Since you mentioned teams, this project had around 10 people, you said. How many were in Scratches?
Well, basically two. My ex-partner, and you could say the music composer, Taylor of Rats, was like the third. Yes, the
perfect
third marketeer, more or less. Yeah.
So, with the raise of the team, that might be a good segue to Serena, which, funnily enough, I posted the review on my blog for Serena today. And during the research I did for that, I hadn't realized it was a collaboration project between like 4 different studios. How did this idea came to be?
4 different studios. I think it was even more
Or
than that
5?
when you take into account. No, yes, when you take into account independent contributors, like we had Infamous Adventures, media workshop from Prominence Game. We had which else? We had individual contributions from, for example, Ben Chandler, the illustrator from Watched Eye Games. Some fans from the community as well. It's been such a long time as well. But of course, Jan Caban.
The Space Quest?
Space Quest, yeah, some small,
Men from Andromeda, I think.
yeah, maybe book titles. But Jan Caban, developer of Julia, and around that time he contributed with a lot of work. In fact, he mostly programmed the game along with me, as far as I remember. So it was a lot of things. Everyone made a small contribution, be it like a tidbit of lore or an Easter egg or some artwork that we put in the game. All in all, that game was made in 2 months, which is it's short, but it was. I couldn't understand how fast it was made because it was a lot of people, coordinated, and it's something that we just wanted to get out of our system. We had even the writing was distributed across several people too. So yeah, it was a really fun experience. And again, something that which is it's kind of a recurring theme here. It blew out of proportions when we launched the game without any sort of press or promotion. We're just putting on Steam for free. And next thing we know, it has like 1 million downloads. It was absolutely, crazy.
And how did this collab idea came to be?
Oh well, that's a whole longer story. Serena is an actual person that was involved in a very sad episode in adventure game community related to the developer of the Shuri Sweet Larry Reloaded, who did the Kickstarter. So anyway, I don't want to relive all that, but this person was very crappy towards his team and especially towards Serena, which was they were contributors, ad honorem contributors to this project, and this person behaved like a jerk. Outing Serena in public, it was a awful moment. I mean, I remember lots of like, whoa, where is this guy coming from? Why is he doing this? And Serena was having a rough time. And I had this story, this very short story, like roaming in my mind, and I proposed to everyone, developers, colleagues, and friends close to me, hey, how about we do something about this? How about we counterbalance this, ugliness with something beautiful? And that's how Serena came to be. It was in the news. I remember Kotaku did an article about it, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I think it was a really good thing. It was a good way, to do something positive when you have, so much negativity around you. And I remember everyone involved was proud of what we did. And I'm very proud too. I think it's a wonderful little game, that people debated for months. Like, what does it all mean? What the hell the ending means? And it was fun. So it was really good that it happened.
And when around this timeline did Asylum started as an idea?
Around it was 2014, if I'm not mistaken. Asylum was already in production. which began in 2010, give or take. Yeah.
Also years earlier.
Yeah. Several years earlier, yes. It was already kickstarted by then. Yeah.
And can you walk us through the decade plus of Asylum development?
Whew, I mean, we could spend hours. I mean, it's been a long development for sure. Lots of things happen in between. Too many things. It was an ambitious project to begin with. The goal was always to create this extremely oppressive atmosphere of a architecturally accurate asylum with this story that was in my mind, and lots happened. I mean, one of the biggest issues you could say was the shift in industry needs, or what the industry expects. So before Asylum, we created our own engine from scratches, and that was it was one of the reasons why it was so successful. And I wanted to repeat the same with Asylum. This was around pre-production in 2009. So consider that was like a point of inflection in the industry when generalist engines such as Unity and Unreal began to proliferate, and the quality and expectations of the games like skyrocketed, like what people wanted and what people wanted to see in a game, right? And I always, wanted to make the most out of this idea, Asylum. I wanted to ensure it remained cutting edge. I mean, when we announced the game with the first trailer, it was another huge deal. The trailer was one of the most popular ones in GameSpot, Game Trailers website, which is now defunct. It was another wow, this game looks amazing. The graphics were cutting edge by the time. But, as I was saying, things happened. Generalist engines happened, 3D, photorealistic 3D happened, and we had this. We are trapped in between of that. I realized that maintaining or attempting to maintain development of our own engine would be a disaster. It would have been too expensive. I am still not sure if that was the right decision. It's impossible to know that. But we decided to try luck first with Unity. I didn't like how the game looked in Unity, but then we tried with Unreal. And that's when I said, okay, this is better for us. We still had to create our own engine in a lower level of Unreal, but all the 3D rendering, all this layer of porting to other devices, gamepad support, all of that, we make the most out of Unreal in that area. And of course, it also led to other amazing experiences. So it was a travel development. It was a travel development because we wanted to remain old school, like Scratches was. And it turns out that making a game like Scratches today is extremely difficult and cost expensive. It sounds like, a sort of paradox, but it's how it is because the needs of the industry are different now. We aren't even thinking about doing, these sort of panoramic games ever again. Asylum was the last, destination for us. We are now moving on to real-time 3D. So yeah, it was a love letter to the past, you could say.
From Scratches, which was old manor-based game, to Serena, which was a cabin game. Now we got into an Asylum. Is that again you trying to think of different locales that those old 80s horror films would be located in, or what? Why an Asylum essentially for this one?
So first is something that I like, a sort of sandbox approach to the environment. I consider the environment a protagonist of the story. Even you could say the antagonist, because you don't know who the antagonist is in Scratches until very late in the game, and the same holds true for Asylum. You don't really know that. You perceive it, but right now what you have in front of you, the Asylum itself, is like a character, like the villain, quote, in the story. And I like that. I've always liked that. I think it has to do a lot with, going back to a previous conversation, King's Quest, which has a sort of sandbox approach. You are in Daventry, which is like a very small, contained game world. You walk around, you even can walk in cycles around this game world, like the little planet of, The Little Prince, the book. And I like that. So I like keeping the character constrained in this, like environment and do things with it. So I think that's one of the reasons, and the other one is that I always wanted to explore the setting of the mental institute, just like the Victorian mansion. They are like cliches in the world of the horror genre, and the idea was always to subvert the expectations. Like you approach Crashes thinking, oh, it's another haunted house game, and then you realize, oh wow, that's not quite what I think it was. And something very similar happened with Asylum, even though a lot of people actually thought it was straightforward. I guess it's more subtle than Scratches in that regard, but once you look a little deeper, you realize that the game is not what you expect it to be. And that's, one of the things that Asylum in a way tried to subvert from Scratches story-wise.
Since we are around a year now from the release of Asylum, do you have any retrospectives in mind already of what went well, what didn't go well, and the general journey of Asylum as a project?
I mean, as a whole, I'm really happy with how the game turned out. We gave it our very best until it was over. Lots of people, again, because of how the ending is executed or what the expectations were with the game, lots of people said, this thing was rushed. And it wasn't rushed at all. It came out as it was supposed to be. Maybe on some, are there things I would want to have added? Yes, for sure. Lots. A game, any work of, any creative work, it's never really done. You just let it go. We let it go in a state that I was very happy with. We could have added some more background lore, more hotspots, more things you can explore, more notes or items or stuff. It's a huge environment, right? So, and yes, in some parts it does feel a bit empty, maybe. I'm talking about on a game design level, but it's one aspect. Things that I think many things went right. Sure, other across the development, other things were like maybe bad decisions. Like I said earlier, I think changing the engine was good for the game in the long run. It delayed development. The game came out, it came out a better game than it was supposed to be because the characters in our in-house engine, Dagon, they would have looked, stiff, or maybe we should have resorted to comic book characters, which would have hardened the atmosphere. I don't know. It's I don't like to speculate. Lots of things could have happened in the end, the decision, it was a decision, maybe. It wasn't, I don't know if it's bad or wrong at this stage, but it was a decision. The game came out, and that's all that matters. And I'm happy with it. And in fact, we are collecting, many positive reviews on Steam. I think like we had this first batch of some mixed reviews because people were comparing the game to scratches. It is natural, of course. It is. We said this is the spiritual successor to scratches, but I never wanted to repeat scratches. It's a different game. From a creative standpoint, it attempts different things. And over time, you are seeing that we are still getting reviews. It is still maintaining very positive reviews on Steam, which is, kind of a small miracle today, especially with such a niche adventure game. And it's selling well. So I can't complain, really. I can't complain. I'm just happy it is out there. You could say it's too early to make a proper retrospective. We may need, it's been a long development, we may need years to look back and make a proper balance of how Asylum came out to be. I still think people have not digested what the game tries to tell you.
How many team members did Asylum have?
On average, it was maybe 5 to 7, and at the end of development, we were 18 people working on the game. So we really gave it our best, and I spent every single penny left in the bank account to launch the game. Like really, I was basically, I was at the point in which I was expecting the first payment from Valve to pay people. It was like a really, really stressful last stretch to get the game done.
So you have gone from 2 to 3 people from scratches to experience around 10 people with the risk profile, and now a bit of a lower at first, but then even more people for Asylum. So you have gotten some valuable experience with bigger teams.
Even more than that. Senscape at one point was 40 people.
Oh, really?
Even had to for the Silent Hill Ascension project. Yes,
I was gonna go to that project.
There you go. We were 40 people, and we even had to sub-hire a group from Chile. So among those 40 people, there were, Chilean employees from. Oh man, I'm drawing a blank. Well, I mean, some friends in Chile who have a company too. A1 Studios. There you go. A1 Studios. A1 Studios. Finally.
So, going to the Silent Hill project, since my blog and this podcast is about indie development, indie games mostly, I consider this an interesting experience to have, to compare between independent production, independent stuff, and how you work as part of a AAA production, most likely. So, first of all, how did this project came to be?
Let's see. I was teaching Unreal at the Unreal Fellowship around that time. This was, like a shift in the game and film industry during the pandemic. They really wanted to boost the efforts in education, and they got in touch with people who were, proficient in Unreal. I had ample experience by then. I was a teacher of Unreal in some schools in Buenos Aires, and well, I worked with Epic in what was it, maybe 5 Unreal Fellowships, 5 or 6. I don't recall, but it was it was 2 years and a half, and we scored. I mean, It's a big community. It was a wonderful experience. Lots of artists from several industries or even different roles, producers, post-production composers, video compositors, game developers. They were all in Unreal Fellowship. You're talking about a cohort of 100 people from all around the world and in several roles of the industry. That was an amazing effort from Epic, which sadly it's not what it used to be. But anyway, I got in touch with people. They knew me. I began to receive job offers. One of them was making a cinematic video clip for this is a popular mobile game. Man, I'm drawing so many blanks today. But anyway, I mean, we made this video clip, 10 minutes. It was really very, extremely stressful gig because we came into an already existing project which was on a tight deadline, and we had to create these 10 minutes of cinematic in 2 months. So I barely slept throughout that time, and it's not something I'm ever doing again. But that paved the way to do other things. So long story short, a student of mine gets in touch. He tells me, we need a director for cinematics for a company who is producing some interactive series, like web series. And that's how I got acquainted with Genvid and a wonderful team of people. Many of them were ex-Telltale employees, from production to creative to writing. And I got involved as the director of cinematics. But the game was not the game. The series was in a very early stage when I arrived. And it shifted in, vision and style, even format. And they began to need more cinematic artists. That's where I jump in. I say, okay, I know lots of artists who have been working with me, some ex-students. Consider that we needed a very specific role because this series, not a game per se, but a series was being developed in Unreal Engine. So I needed a very specific role, which is sequencer artist, which is a feature from Unreal Engine. You still don't have experienced sequencer artist in the industry these days. It's a very, very, niche role. And because of my network and the people that I knew, I was acquainted with lots of them. That's how Senscape became the provider of cinematic artists and even world building to the Silent Hill Ascension project. In the end, we produced the character pipeline as well, using metahumans. Heavily modified metahumans, actually. It was, very complex, extremely complex project. We had to produce 16 hours of cinematics in maybe 5 to 6 months, something like that, which was unheard of in the industry at that stage. I know the series was not very well reviewed or received by the community of fans because it's not your typical Silent Hill, and there were other business decisions that behind the project which had nothing to do with us that resulted in mixed reception. But the content itself, what was achieved during that period, we were very proud of that. It was a long shot. It was even many of the ex-Telltale folks told us this is a miracle. Like, this is not something you see every day. So on that front, it was a successful project, and we learned a huge lot. I think it was thanks to that experience that we came back to Asylum with a different, mindset and experience on production, and we said, okay, this is exactly what we need to do to finish the game. And here we are today.
I find it funny that another project you had outside of Senscape is still a horror project, and perhaps that's why you've forgotten the mobile game. Perhaps it wasn't a horror one.
It wasn't a. It was. You're right. Free Fire. There you go. Free Fire. I'm sorry. It's not my area. No, it's not my area, because I was going to say Fortnite. It wasn't Fortnite. No, it's Free Fire. Free Fire Battle with Style, and it had 1 million viewers. So those 10 minutes that we did had 1 million viewers, and it was well received. So anyway, yes, you're right. Anything that's not horror, I quickly forget about it.
And as you said, as you teased a bit in the end, after the experience with the Silent Hill project, you came back to Asylum with a fresh perspective. What would you say, what are some lessons or differences you could say from the top of your head between being an indie developer compared to working on a big project like that? Like, what are some of your personal takeaways?
There's lots of politics involved. Especially, I mean, when it's a AA game, when you have multiple studios, collaborating, it gets too political. Basically, negotiating with partners, negotiating even with team members. So it's a whole layer that you don't have in the indie world or a smaller scale project. I think I got into many fights. I think in the end it was for good, but there's too much fighting on every front. When it's such a big project. And I mean, it was a wonderful experience, and I made friends with amazing people in that project. But I would say that's maybe the biggest difference: the politics that get in the way of doing something, which makes sense, because you're not calling the shots yourself. You have a budget. You have someone who tells you, okay, we have to do it this way because this was an agreement, because this is on paper, and it's hints a lot. It's legal and the finances and things that are way over your head. So it's different worlds. I prefer the indie world, and I mean, I want this stage in my life. I want to enjoy what I do and sleep well, and ensure that my team is not crunching. So we scale back after that. I tried the path towards being a big company. I guess we could be even bigger today, but I decided this is not what I want for me. So yes, we're again a cozy team doing some projects. We may be hiring again and scaling up in a few months as we enter production of our next big game. I don't even know when that's coming out, but it's happening. So yeah.
That was the last thing I wanted to close up this really interesting interview. And again, thank you very much for joining. I'm a fan for years, so I really appreciate this. As we sit here right now, start of 2026, can you tease us a bit about what's next for Senscape after Asylum?
Well, actually, I mentioned this in our Discord and even a Steam post as well. There are 3 things, and only 2 are sort of confirmed. We have a game that is coming actually sooner, which is a sort of an experiment and something just to, pass the time. It's not even an adventure game, just a silly game, also horror, something, that's looking good, it's fun, blood, murderers, people running, so it's cool. We are not ready to show anything or announce anything, but it seems like it's coming fairly soonish. We'll see. The other game is the proper, narrative follow-up. It's not going to be quite point and click, but still something point and click fans will enjoy. it's different. In some ways, it's different than Scratches and Asylum, and in other ways, it's a bit going back to the roots because it has an atmosphere similar to Scratches than Asylum, right? So it takes place in a far away ranch. It's not ranch. There is not a proper English translation for that. It's estancia, the proper, the word. It takes place in Argentina, and it's like not a mansion. It's a house. It's a house, but it's more of a ranch. It has some, it's rooted in local history. So basically, you get to explore a supposedly haunted house again, and we are going to subvert your expectations again because it's even more paranormal than Scratches. But what I'm focusing very strongly on this game is that something that used to be very common in science fiction, stories of many years ago at the turn of the century, right? When the paranormal had some, sort of pointing in common with science. Like you could explain the paranormal with some pseudoscience, and it was acknowledged as science. Now that has changed a lot. The paranormal, people think different about the paranormal or supernatural stuff today, but there are many stories from that period, especially in our local history, about this sort of thing. So what I'm trying to do is a paranormal adventure deeply rooted in science, meaning that everything that happens in the paranormal world of the adventure could be explained by scientific means. Think something like a movie like Legend of Hell House does from the 70s. It's a fantastic horror film. It's that sort of thing. Anyway, it's still a long coming, it's very early in production, so we'll see. And then I'm doing something else which is almost like a hobby, a more smaller game even, something that I want to just program by myself with old tools, just to get all this new technology out of my system and kind of bring me back to how game development was 30 years ago. So yeah, those are basically the things happening at Senscape at this stage in early 2026.
And for the listeners, since this is recorded a couple of months before the actual release of the podcast, there might be some more news coming up for those projects until then. So be sure to be part, I would say, on the Senscape Discord. That would be probably the best place to check up for updates.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yes, definitely. Discord gets the cutting edge news. Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you very much again, Agustin, for joining me today and for sharing all those experiences, past and hopefully new.
Thank you very much for having me, and it was a wonderful talk. Thank you. Nice questions too.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, again, and come back again soon. Take care, everybody.